Hey, I'm Scott Cuthbert, CEO of Safeopedia,
And I'm Gabe Encarnacion. I'm Vice President of BBL Safety.
and over the last couple of years, Gabe and I have been collaborating, working together, kind of behind the scenes. You've seen him at Safety Connect and a lot of other Safeopedia events, and we just thought we could get together and talk about Safeonomics. We're not safety professionals. We're not providing safety advice. But there seems to be an underlying or a overarching, theme that safety professionals don't necessarily get the respect they deserve from their organizations, and they don't necessarily understand the language of the business in order to present initiatives or get investments or budgets, in coming in their favor, their direction. So we thought we could, get together and help on that side of the safety business with safety folks.
Yeah, and I think this is a great time for us to enjoy some good conversation, to some things that Scott and you and I have been curious about over the years of the intersection of business and safety and how that works, and ultimately how it can make the profession better for everybody, to make businesses work better, to help people work better, and to advance the safety profession. So hopefully these discussions will be helpful and interesting, and something that we can continue to work on as a community and move forward in to help the profession improve.
Yeah, and if you're tuning in and listening, and you want to be a guest, you think you have something to contribute, reach out to Gabe or myself on LinkedIn, or on our respective websites, and connect. And we'd love to hear from you and know what we could do, again, to provide some insider advice from a business perspective, from a Safeonomics perspective, to our safety family out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, we wanted to kick things off right with our episode. I don't know if this is episode 0 or episode 1, but we've invited Corrie Pitzer, CEO of SafeMap International, to be our first guest and talk about the future of safety and trends and things that he's seen, and then some ideas on maybe how to prepare yourself to be a safety professional of the future.
So enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
British-owned company, mining company called Union Corporation, and then they were taken over by a large South African company, General Mining, and it became Gencor. And this new company later started to become extremely expansive in their ideas, progressive in their ideas, and grown from a company with 60 mines in South Africa to merge with BHP in Australia, and is today the largest mining company in the world. And I have a view that, to some degree, where safety fit in, that organization then played a role in its progressive thinking. And it also had to do with the mindset and the capabilities of one particular individual. The CEO of this company was a person with the name of Brian Gilbertson, who, from memory, was actually a nuclear scientist when he became the head of a mining company. So, broad thinker, but he had this vision. And the vision was that safety is a drag on the business. Safety is killing the business, and because everything that they want to do progressively, fast moving, the safety profession were holding it back, tying it down with audits and all kinds of things, which is, fine, that's true. But it never became part of the strategic imperative in the organization until, and this is tragically so, and I'm talking about this particular example, but it's true of current day situations, until a disaster in the organization, 2 disasters. One was the Kinross mine disaster, which killed 177 people. Massive shock into the organization. The CEO got fired. A new CEO got appointed, this guy. And he was just appointed. Another disaster happened. 18 people killed, 28 people killed. Anyway, this is the thing. If there is no trigger in an organization that triggers this kind of rethinking who we are and what do we need to do about safety, the realization that safety can kill our business or the lack of it, like BP had paid billions for the disasters it experienced, and yet, and you know, everybody, you know, they write books about how bad BP was and is, and what mistakes they made, and there's lots of books and documentaries, but they were on the verge of becoming an organization that drove safety far more progressively than any other organization. They were the first early adopters of this whole concept of high reliability organization, and were making huge strides in it. And then this disaster struck, and now they're the dog of the industry, and they lost billions in the process. Now, that kind of trigger in an organization can get the CFO and the CEO to suddenly pay attention.
Right.
That this could put us out of business. Now, nobody needs that in order to get ourselves on the drawing board in the board, to get ourselves in the board thinking in terms of strategic planning, strategic direction in the organization. But the times that I've been involved in board meetings recently, it is almost tragic what the discussion about safety is all about. It is no different than this discussion that's being held at the toolbox meeting with a supervisor where they had an accident. The board meetings are very much looking at accidents and very much looking at the accident rates. And you know, if you have that kind of focus at a board meeting level, and this is the metrics that they need at the board level, because that's their legal exposure, so I understand that. But if that's the discussion, you're not thinking strategically in this particular regard. You're almost everything else you do is progressive, strategic. Safety is operational and tactical at the very best. There are exceptions. There are organizations that I've dealt with that they actually developed proper strategic plans in the organization at a high level and adopted at a high level. And here's one client that I heard the other day, where usually the safety people would come and make presentations at the board. You know, this is our graphs, and you know, and this is how good we are, and everybody sit and nod, and some of the board members sleep. I'm just saying that tongue in cheek. I'm not
not going to name names or anything.
but here's what the COO of this organization said. The safety people, I'm not going to do any presentations to the board anymore, because I'm the safety leader in the organization. I'm the CEO. I'm the safety leader. Now, just think about the implication of that. What is the CEO going to discuss? COO. The COO is going to discuss safety at strategic level. So maybe it's a structural change almost at board levels that needs to be done in order to make this discussion go that way, that direction. And that's just the one side of it.
Right.
From what you just said. So just a reflection on that specific area is how we are structured. What kind of questions the board ask?
Right.
You know, that determines the questions the board asks, determines what everyone else in the business is doing, because that's what is being needed. That's what I need to deliver. And the reporting process in the business, the ESG reporting, whatever the reporting is, that determines the activities. Right. Not necessarily the operational activities, because all these reports can be clunked on and clamped on and done and polished and sent up. But how many people spend their time preparing reports, and then what is being done in the business?
Yeah,
I think what's interesting about that too is that it's kind of like that saying, "Whatever is measured gets managed." I think the downside of that can also happen, where if you are measuring the wrong things, if you're paying attention to the wrong things, you're probably also managing the wrong things. So if you are just looking at something like accident rates, which could be all retroactively retroactive, then the problem is that it's hard to go to a strategic standpoint and move forward, because everything that you're looking at has already happened. You're just reacting to the metrics that you see without actually moving forward and changing something in the future.
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the root of the problem. But it also, you can't expect the board to talk about anything else because they've got legal exposures. And the OSHAs, the government organizations, they measure you in terms of the accidents you're having or not having.
Right.
And you get punished for that. You're going to get dragged to court for that. And so they have to look at it. But that's unfortunately the trap that we're in. But the thing you just said there, what worries me sometimes is that it says what gets measured gets managed. But also then what gets measured gets fudged in order to be managed. And there's no doubt that organizations are obliged. I mean, you look at a construction company, and they, like in the case of BP and Transocean, this is a client and a service provider. Now there's this huge focus. If there's an accident on my premises and it's a subcontractor that has the accident, I am legally exposed to that. So what do? I say to these guys that's coming to work on my site, how many accidents you've had? What shows your accident rate? And of course, if you don't have a good accident rate, you're not getting the job. So what does the service provider do? They will hide everything and anything in order to not go out of business. You can't blame them. So now you get this toxic spiral in the organization, and all organizations have contracting companies doing work for them. And in fact, if you take in consideration, what kind of work do we contract out? Our high-risk work, because that reduces our own exposures. But now these guys are now doing a high-risk work, and then we negotiate contract and terms with them, and we grind them down on the cost of the contract, so the unit cost, etc. So they have to come in with bare minimum costs, but they have to give you a top-of-the-range safety system in which they have no accidents. Well, that's clearly impossible. So what's going to happen? You're going to find fudging, you're going to find distortion, you're going to have manipulation, whatever you want to call it, in order to satisfy those requirements and get contracts.
Yeah.
I like the direction this is headed already, where it's looking at things like the metrics or discussions with the board. It seems like this is not a field or an area where a lot of safety professionals get some input and get a chance to really play and understand the language that's spoken by the C-suite or by the board. I mean, just a quick example of this before we jump into the intros. I mean, there was someone that had sent some statistics or even some results from their organization of some incidents and incident rates. And I started layering asking some questions about, okay, well, how do you tie dollars to this? And after not that long, kind of figuring out, oh, wow, there is a way to actually come up with a metric to tie dollars to some of these things. And this safety professional I was talking to was saying, wow, I've not looked at it like this before. I'm like, oh my gosh, how could you not look at it like this?
Yeah.
This is really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that a lot of people are in this profession. They might not know how to take information or data and translate it to something where a business leader would be able to understand it and take action on it.
Yeah, there's some interesting notions about the financial aspect of safety that from my perspective is probably if we can just jump into that. An experience I had was the financial people pay no attention to safety in this organization, not generally. And so they were involved in leadership training, safety leadership training that I presented in the organization. And they were then asked to fill in leadership 360s of people that work for them who did come to the training. And then they said, no, this has got nothing to do with us. We're sitting in an office and eventually the CFO was convinced by the COO to come to the leadership training. And that changed his total perspective on safety. He became one of the biggest supporters of the safety program in the organization, the large gold mining company. And to the point, if you think about it in this way, what if the C-suite suits, if they arrive on site, sometimes with a corporate plane, and it's all looking good, and they all throttle out to the boardroom of the mine site, and they chat and they fly off. But what happens if the CFO and the CEO and these top people, if they actually get out into the workplaces and they start talking, engaging, kicking tires with people and talking about safety, the CFO talking about safety, that sends a very powerful message. And so how can we get the financial silo in the organization to pay attention to this aspect? And I'm not too sure if it's which one should be coming first, whether it's us paying attention to the financial side of safety, the safety profession, and or the other way around. Now, us paying attention to the safety to the financial side, and I know there's been always, the cost of safety, what we can do in safety to add to the bottom line of the organization. Mm-hmm. That sounds good in theory. My experience is that there's a risk involved in that. If you, in your organizational culture, if your message about safety is, we want you to be safe, so we're gonna make more profit, you are on the wrong track.
Right.
That's not gonna fly with nobody in the business. So if it does add to the bottom line and does add to the profit line of the organization, great. Then that's what I also believe it should be. We should not be a milestone. No, milestone. What is the other word?
A millstone, roadblock.
Milestone, not a milestone.
Yeah.
We should not be a millstone around the neck of the organization. We should be a milestone in its business. So, but it's all around the culture of the organization, and then what are perceptions of people around that? That's the risk, the downside of it.
So that brings up a thought that I had whenever you tie dollars to something that it almost becomes this moral quandary, because if you take it to its like basically logical end, you're essentially putting a dollar amount on a person, right? You're putting a dollar amount on the worker. But we do this all the time. I mean, you do it with a fully loaded hourly rate or a labor rate for an individual or a position. But now it's if you're looking at their safety, now you're starting to put dollar amounts and dollar values on a person's well-being. That I can see how that could be a really sticky situation and can go down a wrong path if it's not utilized properly. But I think in the sense of the business analysis side of things, it has to be put in those terms because the business exists to actually be profitable.
Right.
I 100% agree. Sorry, Scott, I 100% agree with you. I also believe that we have become too precious about safety and about its and about the organization that we're there for the well-being of employees. We're not there for the well-being of employees. No organization is designed primarily to look after the well-being of employees, except a church. But that's not a profitable organization anymore. So we have to probably get a little bit more realistic about, and we meaning employees in an organization. We have huge expectations of organizations these days, as and we are so easily annoyed and offended and everything that and I'm talking about this whole woke direction, which for an old person like me, I find it extremely annoying that everybody is so woke and so offended about everything. And it comes back to what you just said. It is, in many ways, it is about what is the business there for? What is the business there for? What is the business of the business? And I agree with 100% about that. But that does not necessarily mean that satisfies the people we want to come and work for us.
Right. And what's interesting about when I was looking at this, I had done a lecture series for a master's program where we were talking about the business acumen for safety professionals, and it was almost kind of fun to poke at the concept of safety first. And it's like, okay, well, we can agree that safety is not first in a business, no matter what the posters may say on the wall or the email signatures. It's not first. So where does it fall? So first of all, making money is first for a business. That's why any business exists, is to become profitable. The second would be the second most important is the production. It's the thing that makes the money. That's what's second. Third would be anything that supports the production. So maybe safety falls into the third in that hierarchy. But then looking at safety, first of all, are we satisfied with the fact that we're part of production support, that it isn't first in the organization? From a business standpoint, if you have a CFO or a CEO or anybody else in the C-suite looking at their company, if let's say in that mining company, their job is not safety. Their job is to make money off of the things they're extracting from that mine. Safety just supports those operations. So is it that safety professionals need to understand that that's the case, and that safety is not necessarily going to ever be first from a business standpoint? And if that's the case, what do we do with it?
Yeah, I think we're in a really bind if we have a look at and I it's interesting that you say safety third, because that's Mike Rowe's website, and I like the idea of that. It kind of like puts it into perspective. But I think the problem is, if we talk about safety, then we talk about containment of the operations. We talk about putting controls into place so that the organization keeps on track and that it doesn't deviate, and so that people that doesn't get injured, etc. But if we change the terminology, and we also change the location of that terminology, if we look at risk as the terminology and the management of risk, and we have the clear understanding that the management of risk has got two sides. The one side is opportunity, and the other one is the downside, is the failure. And the more risk you can take, and I always love this analogy that I've used in the past, and this is the hurdler running 100 meters hurdle, and the purpose of that hurdler is to run as fast as possible to be the champion. That's the business now. Think about it in terms of the business then.
Right.
So the safety professional tells the hurdler, in order to not fall and break your leg, etc., jump as high as you possibly can over every hurdle to miss them. The risk professional will tell the hurdler, jump as low as possible over that hurdle. You barely have to touch everyone. That's the margin that you've got to operate on. That'll make you the fastest. And that's why, if we think in safety terms and in risk terms, we come up with different scenarios. And that's the upstream focus, I think, that we're missing, because safety is added on at the downstream level of the business. That's where it goes wrong. That's where we put the safety controls into place. But the messaging about this was very much, and Scott and I are doing the series about Deming, that had the focus was in quality exactly the same.
Right.
Catch the quality deficiencies at the back end, and we fix them all up with inspections. And Deming changed it all and said, we build quality into the process. So we build risk management upstream into the process, where it's part of the operating model of the organization and not separate from it. that I think is the future of it. We cannot continue on this path.
Yeah.
Adding
That was, oh, sorry. I was gonna make that point. So I'm glad you brought up the Deming series that we're doing, because it's about baking quality into the process, not adding it, at the end, right? And so, how would you, again, thinking about most of the safety professionals that are out there working for, medium to large organizations, not necessarily enterprise type organizations, how would they, it's easy to say, hey, let's build risk, into the process, but how could they get started with that within their organization? Kind of taking it upstream.
Well, I think, and there may be a bigger problem behind it. I think that this risk engineering is a production function, is an engineering function, or whatever the production process of the organization is. So the central production process, the people who look after that, they are not necessarily trained in the concepts of risk and risk management and safety and so on. They are not trained in the skills and techniques of people management, which is also largely what they end up doing.
Yeah.
And so if you look at, okay, how do we start this, or where is it going to have to happen? I think it is going to have to happen in the curricula of those technical professions in order to make that happen in the organizations that they eventually get deployed, whatever engineering they're going to do, in that, or manufacturing they're going to do. But now we are here now. So what do we do now? So we still have the structure. Safety sits on the one side, production on the other side as a functional entity in the organization, etc. So maybe what we should be doing is have a look at how do we take extreme measures to limit the safety function in an organization. How to reduce as much as possible to the bare minimum. And then this comes back to that, what I mentioned as as in that slide, as the future of safety with the three forks. If you look at the future of work as such, where we're going to be in 10, 15, and 20 years from now, with a rapid emergence of Industry 4.0 and 5.0, whatever, and you have this massive technological advances coming our way and integrated into the organizations and taking a hold of the safety function in the organization with sensoring and the Internet of Things and whatever. So are we now equipped as a safety profession now for that eventuality?
Right.
I don't think we are.
No.
I think we're still operating on 1960s and 70s kind of production processes in most organizations to some degree at this stage, structural, functionally designed, etc. But this new organization is going to look so much different. The new organization is going to be ripped apart from what we do now. So I don't think we're ready for that. So we have to look at what are we going to do as a safety profession to change fundamentally to be ready for that.
It sounds like there's what you're implying, and I agree with this, is that the fact that we refer to the safety side of the business and the operation side of the business really is that's part of the problem, is that safety should be more integrated into the entire system itself. It's not a separate part of oversight or any sort of that, in its own silo. It really should be baked into the production process itself. And it doesn't, when I say production, I don't mean even just the manufacturing side of things, but really just operationally the way that the company works. It should be part of it's part of the SOPs. It's part of how you do your business. It's not a separate group that is trying to essentially cramp the style of the business itself. It should be part of how they do things. And if it's part of how you do things, it should be making it better. I kind of think of in a race car, there are all the pieces that are on a high performance vehicle are there for a specific reason. If it's to increase downforce, increase traction, it's to make it perform better. If there's a part that is not adding to the performance, it's removed. It's just additional weight. But safety should be part of the entire machine to help it all work better instead of just being the oversight because someone says you have to have oversight. I think that's really when the organization will embrace the business case for safety.
Well, and it depends on the question of that is absolutely there in the sense of the question of how much risk do we take?
Right.
And you talk about the racing car, probably a very good example of again, to go as fast as possible. And so if we understand the risk and the taking of risk as against the avoidance of risk, that's the thing, that's safety. Safety is the avoidance of risk, fundamentally. The alleviation of risk, the reduction of risk, the substitution. And you look at the hierarchy of control, there is everything in there is a millstone in the organization. Except if you could really talk about innovation in the organization, there is no provision for that in the hierarchy of control in that sense. So, because it wants to reduce risk, that's the heart and soul of it. And I say we should optimize risk, and we should optimize risk taking. And it doesn't mean shortcutting and don't care and just whatever you want to do. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. But it comes back to that hurdler. That's a higher level of risk taking, operating closer to the edge. And that's, we can only do that if we really understand that the operating process needs to be optimized in terms of quality, in terms of risk optimization. But we don't have that philosophy. We don't have that philosophy in any shape or form in safety. It is about the response to failure. You look at everything in safety today, whether it's the new view or the old view, it is safety differently, HOP. It's all about the response to failure, and or largely the response to failure. It is not how do we optimize the opportunity of the organization. We don't think in those terms.
Yeah, and I think it's, I guess where I'm as thinking about the practitioners again out in the field, and I'm kind of circling back around the same topic, but you're a contractor on the job site, you've got workers in the field, you obviously want them to be wearing the proper PPE and identifying the hazards and eliminating those risks. So how would you go about starting to change the mindset on the work face about optimizing versus eliminating those risks, right?
So I'm going to do the terrible interviewer tactic, and I'm going to answer your question with a question back to you, Scott.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because you are a co-founder of a company, so you're an entrepreneur. You have taken on a certain degree of risk,
right,
probably higher than a lot of other people would be comfortable with. I mean, so explain to me from your perspective as a founder of a company, because ultimately, if you have people that are at the executive management level, even at the higher leadership levels, their appetite for risk is probably different than the people below them. That's why they've kind of stuck their neck out to get into that position. I mean, CEO stands for a career-ending opportunity, so that's why they're there. So give us a peek into your thought process as a co-founder of a company, as in executive management. How do you view risk? What is your appetite for that like?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think I it's funny because I tell the story about how my wife was hanging out with her friend, and her friend was talking about how her husband loves to go to the casino and gamble, and my wife said, "Oh, I'm so lucky because Scott doesn't like to go to the casino. He doesn't really like playing cards and gambling." And I said, "Yeah, unless my house is on the line, I'm really not interested in the game, right?" But I think definitely have it's a risk reward, right? And willing to risk more in order to potentially have a higher reward. But I'm not the worker, on the job site, climbing the scaffold. We're not running a construction company, but I'm taking financial risks, let's say, not health risks, right, or safety risks. So it's easy to say, well, if I lose everything, I could start over again. But if you lose a limb or lose your life or lose your capacity to work again, I think it's a different level of risk, right? And it's relatively easy to get people to come on board with a startup kind of company and assume a little bit of risk as employees, knowing that there's maybe some more potential and more opportunity and autonomy than in a big organization. So how do we create that on the job site with iron workers and pipe fitters and electricians, because they're the risk they're taking, they're getting paid hopefully really well for the job they're doing, but how do we build in that risk optimization, I think, that Corrie was talking about, knowing that they could suffer serious health consequences, that you can't just say, well, I'll do a better job next time. You're kind of, it could be career-ending opportunity, right?
Right.
Like you said. So that's again, I think that a lot of the people in our community are those lone wolf safety officers or working in small departments, and I think they buy into what Corrie's talking about, but they don't know how to go about starting to create that change or have those conversations with executive leadership, right? I think they're like Corrie described. Again, my background, although I'm not a safety professional, it was definitely in those industrial construction and mining environments where I was part of a safety committee, with 15 VP director level safety officers and owners, the Exxon Mobil types and the contractors, and they said, hey, look, we're burying the bodies because you asked us to, right? Like we're fudging the numbers so that we can get the next job, and if somebody gets injured, we put them in a lawn chair and give them a flag, and then we tell them that they're now, instead of being a pipe fitter, they're the yard
they're the safety manager.
Yeah, well, the guy making sure the only authorized vehicles come on site. So it's modified work duty instead of lost time injury, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's heard that before. So how do you go about, other than hiring Corrie to come in and talk to your CEO, which is definitely one course of action you could take? How do you go about doing it as a safety professional? And I think, again, in my limited experience, I think the safety professionals who step up and speak out, either one, get fired, or two, get promoted because now you're taking some ownership and you're trying to influence the organization and become a leader. Whereas I think traditionally they're trained a little bit to be compliance officers, right? And so, but I don't know what the specific tactics or strategies would be for starting to not implement those changes, but at least get the mindset of your organization moving in the right direction so that you could bring those changes in at some future point. So non-answer to your your question in my typical sales approach, but
well, it's funny. I think I keep coming back to Corrie's example of the hurdler, and I think that that's probably the best metaphor for risk management that I've heard. It makes complete sense to me. And so maybe because it sounds like if you look at the different roles in an organization, let's say very, very basic, you've got the executive management, let's say you have a founder, an executive who's used to a certain type of risk. You've got the pipe fitters and the welders that are also used to a certain level of risk. That's why they decided to get into that line of work and continue to do it. And so they're accepting those risks. It seems like the safety professional is the one that's kind of in the middle that is stuck. And maybe it's just helping them to understand even that concept of risk versus safety, even from a very small point, that helps them to kind of even be okay with accepting certain risks. Or is that too much to ask?
Yeah, I think we're bound by our focus. We're bound by our professional focus, safety. We are driven to certain actions, the kind of actions that Scott just mentioned, where we have to have compliance at all levels about everything. And what am I getting punishment for as a safety professional organization? I get punishment on a regular basis because of injuries that people have with their hands, slip, trips, and falls, the small injuries. And this is the data that goes up to the board to link back to our earlier discussion. And if there's an increase in my thrift rate, the organization gets upset, the board gets upset because we are less safe. Even though it has got nothing to do with how more or less safe the organization is. Those numbers mean nothing. We're talking about minute little incidents compared to the incredible amount of decision making that goes on in the organization, the activities goes on, and now you have one person who steps over a rock, twists his ankle, and suddenly we have a lost time injury, and everybody is reacting. So we have, this is the other side of thing that maybe we haven't spoken about. We have financial incentives and disincentives associated with these things, and that's right. This financial side comes in. And so what we're actually doing, most organizations, I think, that has safety as part of their bonuses, etc., they are, no doubt, they are punishing their people for bad luck, and they're rewarding their people for good luck. And no one knows what any one person is doing to no one person knows in the organization, what am I doing to contribute to this bonus that I've been given for safety, which is pretty good last month. No one fell over something. I don't know what I've done, and I don't care because I get the money. But this is the distortions that are happening. So you talk about what risks what the top level, what the bottom level, what the middle level accept as terms of risk. That risk appetite thing is absolutely driving our organizations, because that's what they're getting punished for. But I think if I had my own company, big company that manufactures a new kind of car, not electric car, but a fancy car, and I've got thousands of employees, and I had the opportunity, I'd say to them, I don't care if you have a slip, trip, or fall accident. I don't care if you have an ankle injury. Yeah, sorry about that, but that doesn't, nothing's going to happen to you. But I do care if there's any risk out there that could kill you or change your life as an injury, that I will do everything I can as the owner of this business to prevent that from happening to you. Because I think I can't accept that as part of my responsibility, my accountability, that I allow you to be exposed to that kind of risk. So I care about that. But small little trips, slip and falls and these kind of things, I'm not gonna bother with that, and I'm not gonna give you bonuses for that. And I don't know if that's even possible in any shape or form in an organization. Yeah. That should be the focus. That and it's possible to focus exclusively in an organization, not exclusively, primarily focus on the things that can kill people in the business. And I don't like this, we used to look at them in terms of cardinal rules and golden rules. And these days we say it's the sticky stuff, the stuff that can kill you. But it's trivializing that. It's trivializing the seriousness of those injuries. Sticky stuff, I don't like that term, because it doesn't equate to the value of a person in an organization as a human being, and that they don't get seriously hurt or injured in my business.
Right. And I think, again, back to my earlier example, but a lot of the contractors up on some of these sites say if you get injured and you don't report it, that's immediately, you're going to get fired immediately. But then if you do report it, we're going to hide it, so that our incident rates, are modified so that we can get the next contract. So, and you've talked about this a lot, Corrie, about just the openness. And I think what you're getting at is like, hey, if you have a near miss, if you have a slip, if there's a minor cut or pinch point or something, let's talk about it, and let's not worry about it. Let's not count it as a negative incident, but let's just make sure that it doesn't turn into you trip into the open, having a trip and spraining your ankle's fine, but we don't want you tripping and falling into the open pit, right? Or the saw blade, or having your arm pulled in, if it happens again, right? So how do we get our organizations getting that transparency and that open dialogue, so that we're not, like you say, punishing people as soon as they report something, and especially the safety person. I mean, a lot of times they're not even there when things happen, but they're they shoot the messenger when they come come to the manager meetings or the board meetings with those reports, right? So how can we, and I know Corrie, you've talked about it a little bit, some examples where you've called out executives for that kind of stifling management style, and so how could again, coming back to our safety professional, how could they go about tabling this, and maybe trying to get the organization to open up around these conversations?
Yeah, I think the message in the organization about safety, the central message in the organization is, and I always say, and I've done this many times when I did this elimination of fatalities program for this mining company. So we'd start at the beginning of the week with the management team and say, right, let's see how your safety, what are you doing safety? Because then we're going to talk to the workers. And so we asked the manager, what is the reason you want to be safe? And it is not a simple question. Why do you want to be safe? And then they come with all these highfalutin terms and lovely metaphors and ethical jargon, etc. And then I said to them, okay, that's great. I'm going to talk to the workers now. I'm going to ask them the same question. Why do you want to be safe? Not the worker. I'm going to ask them, why do they think you as the manager want to be safe? And do you think they're going to give me that same answer? And that's when they start cringing and saying, no, I'm surprised. But in the end, that is the conduit in the organization, the total conduit in the organization. And I talked to a fellow consultant one day, and he said something great at a presentation. He said the CEO makes the first decision in the company. The guy at the front end, that pipe wrench guy, he makes the last decision. And you better hope it's the same decision. And therein lies the challenge.
Right.
For us as safety professionals, our job is to facilitate that message. But we first have to figure out what the message is. And what it really is, so that we can support. And we're not gonna make it happen. That's the line management's function. That's their accountability to make that message the same one. But we as safety professionals, we must facilitate that. Just like the HR function, the people function, they can facilitate that too and play a role in it. But it's not our accountability. It's the accountability starting at the top of the organization and going right through the middle. And I've said this many times too, is that we have effectively cut the middle management and the supervisor out of the safety business. We've effectively alienated them and siloed them and kept our focus on the worker, because these are the people who have the mistakes, these are the people who have the accidents. We're going to sort them out. We're going to send them all kinds of messages. We're going to train them. In the end, it's the supervisor that determines everything in the business. And that's the decision making that we have to facilitate.
Yeah. And I think that was, back to the Deming principles, right, of that was getting those mid-managers thinking about quality and building it into the process rather than checking for it at the end of production. One thing you touched on, and we kind of glossed over a little bit, but the future of safety, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know where things are going, but we are seeing this exponential explosion of technology, and I think from my perspective at Safeopedia, we sit at an interesting crossroads, because we're talking to safety professionals on a weekly, monthly basis, and then we're talking to safety vendors on a regular basis as well. And so smart PPE or AI vision, computer vision cameras that are watching the production floor or the loading docks, those sorts of things. And so we I can see, in a not too distant future, a point where we're not writing incidents reports anymore. We're not doing hazard identification. Like, all of that is being taken care of by technology. And then the safety professional, I think, is left, again, hopefully, being a leader, asking questions and understanding how to modify those processes or design new processes to build that risk management in there, rather than just spending all their time, filling out forms and submitting reports, right? So if in the future, in the not too distant future, if the machines, are recording the incidents, identifying the hazards, creating those reports, what are safety professionals going to be focused on? And how do you stay relevant in that future?
If we are still there in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this maybe, if I could show the slide that you mentioned. Let me just share this. And you can, and this is the crossroads that I was referring to, or you're referring to, that if you think about safety in terms of where we were and where we're going, we in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, to this day, we operate strongly with safety management systems, functional systems that we add on to the organization. In the 80s and 90s, we had behavior-based safety coming to the fore and made tremendous impact on safety, and brought the whole issue of the human factor a bit to the light, a lot to the light in so many ways. And that started to slowly become known as Safety 1 in these days, with the advent of Safety 2 and Safety Differently. So the Safety 2 and Safety Differently fraternity, which I'm part of for many years, start to look back at Safety 1, BBS, and safety management systems as evil, as a wrong way to do safety. But my view is this, that there is, in a central way, there is never going to be a avoidance of compliance. You talked about, if there's an incident, a chat bot is going to write the report, and things like that. And I think that the compliance levels, monitoring with amazing capabilities, with Internet of Things, etc., safety compliance will continue to exist. But because of this whole advent of technology, I think this system engineering is the focus of the future. We're going to have to contend with enormous shifts and changes in technology around us and integrated that into the workplaces, into every aspect. We need to talk about that. But I think, and this comes back to what I said earlier on, I don't care if you have a slip, trip, or fall, sprain of the ankle, but I do care if there's something that can kill you. And that's that critical risk focus. I think we have to develop, and critical risk management has been a long time in existence in Australia, in the mining industry internationally, and it's slowly coming to the fore in other industries now. But we start to focus more exclusively on serious risk in the organization, if I can call it that. Now, I think that's the one direction that is going to become a lot more prevalent. And Safety One and safety management systems is going to disappear into that. The human resource or people function, you talk about psychological safety, well-being, psychosocial hazards, organizational culture. That's their domain. That's their expertise. We are safety people. We don't have much expertise in that field. I mean, some of us have. There's not some, several have, because we're psychologists. And we started bringing this whole Safety 2 concept into the fore. But in the future, the human resource function, that's where that is going to sit. And Safety 2 and BBS will disappear into that. So what's left? Well, the safety profession isn't there anymore. I think we're going to disappear. And there's going to be these two groupings, and even those two groupings will eventually merge into the future. This is just my speculation, into business optimization, which takes us back to the right of the start of this discussion, that where it's really part of the business operations and optimizing the purpose of the business in the end. And that, I think, is where the future of safety is going to be.
That's pretty cool. I like that idea that it is going to merge. It could be a long time before we get there, but I think that it's already begun. It's already moving in that direction. And I think even from the perspective of looking at how the safety profession has been viewed even since 2019 and 2020, especially in 2020 with COVID, and it was always fascinating to me that it seemed like safety professionals, you either went, one of two things would happen to you. Either you became the new compliance officer, and you were the one that you're stuck there checking off the boxes, and or you were deemed as too expensive, and you were cut from payroll because they didn't have a lot of people that were on site anyway. So why do we need this person handing out band-aids and doing all this stuff? And it was a complete misunderstanding of the value of the safety professional. And I wonder if, to go back to your comment, Scott, for a safety pro, how do they actually demonstrate their value in their business? I think that it starts with even understanding and creating a shared definition of what risk is for the organization. Corrie, you alluded to it a little bit, that the safety professional is kind of in the middle. And when something is in the middle, you can either be a roadblock or you can be the bridge. And I think that safety professionals, if we can start even with understanding what does risk mean for the production workers, what does risk mean for the executive management, and then for the organization as a whole, and then start to build that bridge and say, hey, we understand risk as this. This is what allows this company to exist. It allows us to all have our jobs, to have meaningful work, and start with that and having that shared definition of risk, and then understanding, okay, now that we understand, it's almost like, here's how high those hurdles are that we're running by. Now, what do we do to make sure that we can go as fast as possible as a group and still remain safe while having the shared definition of risk and having a shared acceptance of that risk? That could possibly be a way to start.
Yeah, and I think that, oh, sorry, Corey, if I jumped in.
No.
I was just going to say too that I think that one of the things that we hear is that there isn't a clear path from safety officer to the C-suite. I talk about this a fair bit, but if you're in engineering or in finance or marketing or sales, there's probably a seat at the boardroom table or the C-suite table for you if that's you want to progress through the organization. But safety, there's not really that clear path. And so I think that and again, not career advice, but more of a question of like, what are those adjacent things that safety professionals can focus on or work on from a skills perspective, so they do become that bridge, or they can easily shift to the risk engineering side or the human resources side. And so, Corrie, I mean, you've seen a lot more folks in the field. You've seen a lot of people, I think, probably progress through the ranks, within different organizations. And what kind of career advice would you give to safety professionals now who might be, halfway through, 2/3 of the way through their career, and then maybe what would you say to safety professionals who are just getting into safety?
Well, I would say a practical starting point could be this. I'm in this mid-sized company. I'm the safety professional. I'll set myself clear goals to address the safety management systems in the organization, whatever they are, and see, first of all, what of those systems can I eliminate, take out of the business without having any detrimental effect on the risk level of the organization? Are they there for historical reasons? Are they there for purely compliance reasons? What can I do to change that? That's the one thing. The second thing is, those that you can't take out of the business, that you can't eliminate, how can I speed them up? How can I prove that what I've done here have added to the production process efficiency and therefore to the bottom line of the organization? You don't have to quantify the dollars in the end, because that can take you forever. All you have to do is, how do I contribute to the improvement and the making more lean, the making more agile of production processes of whatever the business I'm in, and make that a substantial part of your business, as against what can I introduce to bug people with? What can I introduce to let the workers now have to do, and to slow them down and whatever? That, I think, there has to be some really simple, practical ways that the safety professional can do that. And I think safety professional that does this will find a seat at the top table of the organization.
I'd agree with that too. I think that there has to be a certain level of curiosity that a safety professional will have about the organization that they're in. Something I noticed with some of the safety professionals that I've talked to is that they love the safety profession, but there are often times that they don't like the companies that they work for. So clearly there's some sort of a disconnect. It's not that they are tired of safety or are sick and tired of dealing with all the safety related topics and issues and thought processes and things like that. I think that there is a disconnect between how they view safety and then the priorities of the organization. So, Scott, to even answer your question of like some of the practical things that a safety professional can do is even building that sense of curiosity about the place where you work. What is it that this person does in their process that they do for work? How does management make decisions? Who are the players in the game? And then starting to see where there might be some inefficiencies, and they might not even be safety related inefficiencies. It could just be a business inefficiency that the safety professional is in a position as the curious individual to find solutions in there and possibly present them at multiple levels. It could be up to the management, could be up to the people in the production floor. But now you're bringing solutions instead of, as you said, Corrie, introducing all these new things that are just layers upon layers of what is probably already a bureaucratic nightmare. But if you can make things easier for the business to run and easier for the workers to do their work, maybe not necessarily safer, but start with easier, and then see how does safety be part of that easy making your work easier process.
Right.
Kind of a clunky way to say it, but I think you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of bottlenecks and issues inside the production process that are generally become accepted, generally become inherent in the organization, and then has safety implications, potential failures. And then therefore we add a control over that, we add a procedure over that. Instead of looking at how can we optimize that production process itself. And that's an engineering function. But we can, as you say, we can start asking questions in a different way, because our primary focus is add-on, not upstream.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good good, Corrie. And I thought you were going to say just watch more of your webinars on Safeopedia, but
I can do that at the end.
yeah. No, but yeah, I think that curiosity or curious approach, right, of asking questions, because you are in a unique position as a safety professional to be talking to different people at different levels in the organization and understanding what's going on. Definitely, and something you could start tomorrow, right? You don't need to go back to school and get a master's degree or become an engineer or a salesperson. You can start asking those questions already in your role. So I did want to mention too that we'd never encourage anybody to drink on the job, but we are recording this session on Robbie Burns Day.
I believe this is Robbie Burns Day. Yes.
Yeah, we didn't give Corrie the heads up, but Gabe and I both had a wee dram of whiskey on the desk here. In not because we want to drink on the job, but just because we want to celebrate Robbie Burns and his wonderful poetry and his dark humor. So
I think that there's some relevance in there with the safety profession, where it's like you think about it, it is. We're knocking on some pretty interesting doors, looking at the intersection of business and safety, because it can be kind of dark. As we said earlier, adding a dollar value to people and to the work that we're doing, it could go south pretty quickly. But I think it's up to the safety professional to make sure that those tools are used, the metrics, the processes, the technology are used properly, so that it actually does something good, instead of being, we don't want to have it be another metric where people are just gaming the system so that they can get their bonus. Yeah. It has to be something that's actually moving the work forward. It's improving people's lives. I think that's where, going back to your slides, Corrie, about the future of safety, those paths, they can be really good, and there's still ways to game those systems. And I think it's up to the safety professional to make sure that those paths are on their way to doing something good and not repeating the mistakes that we've had in years past.
Yeah.
And it probably goes without saying, regardless of what profession you're in, with the advancement of technology and the pace that it's moving, it's going to be the people who can ask the better questions that advance, rather than the people who can efficiently fill out forms or compile reports, right? Like that's going to be commoditized more than it is today. And asking those questions and pushing the boundaries and challenging the status quo is definitely going to be where everybody should be focused. So
yeah, I think also we and that's maybe collectively as a profession, but there's some real good thinking going on in terms of what kind of risks the organization will face in this new world, in this Industry 4.0 world.
Right.
And would the risks be the same or similar to what we experience now? And if in my mind, a bit of reading that I've done on this, and a bit of thinking about, if we have an organization that is highly technologically driven, everything is connected, every worker is connected, everything is censored and measured, and metrics are everywhere, big data and small data, and every data is everywhere. So for me, one of the threats involved in that is that we are going to know less and less of the complex risks in that processes that we're dealing with, because things are going to become so safe that we are going to be exposed, more vulnerable to catastrophic risks. If things go wrong in such a complex world, where everything is so interrelated, modular, etc., if things go wrong there, there is a bigger risk of catastrophic events in the future than what we have now. In terms, if you think about tight and loose coupling in an organization and complexity, that matrix of pigeon. So are we starting to think about that? Coming back to that question about critical risk, are we starting to make? Are we starting to have the right questions, the right focus in our business to start looking out and thinking about this kind of world and a social world that is on the decay? That will people, the virtual world that we've entered into as a result of COVID, forced into, is going to continue and going to expand. More and more people don't want to go to work anymore. So we're going to be less and less connected socially. So if you talk about, the social fabric of the organization of the future, that is immensely under threat. But that's not our function. That's not the safety profession's function. We're not qualified for that. We like to talk about psychosocial hazards and things like that, but we're not supposed to, because we're not really equipped for that. That's going to the people function. Right. What can we contribute now in that regard to start thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a great point.
That was a good point. It sounds like we're grabbing a whole bunch of cans and ripping them open, and there's worms everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I guess people will have to tune in for future episodes to find the answer to all of these questions.
That's what's really exciting about this too, is that, all the questions that we've brought up, it feels like the answers still need to be found. These are still developing. So now this is part of the community aspect. This is where different people jump in with their voices and their experiences. And now we get to start actually building what that future of safety looks like. And hopefully it's better than the one that we've had before.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Corrie. This is a entertaining and informative and educational discussion, and definitely look forward to continuing it on as we go.
Great fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Corrie.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Scott.
And I'll say, in honor of Robbie Burns Day, Lang May or Lum Reek.
Well, I'll just have one more.
Nice.